the second edition of the Watch Dogs official podcast. I am your host, Nick Schmidt, community developer for Watch Dogs, and once again I'm joined by Kim.
Hey.
Hey, Kim. And today we're sitting down with the story design team. For part of the story design team, or is it the whole team right now?
We've got part of them. We're missing a couple of people. But
all right. So
we've got the most interesting people.
Yes.
You're going to pay for that one.
So without further ado, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Kevin Short. I am the lead story designer, lead writer on Watch Dogs.
I'm Ethan Petty. I'm a story designer / scriptwriter.
And I'm Lee Kuo, and I'm one of the scriptwriters.
Great. So I want to start by a very simple question, and please, you probably know that, you don't spoil anything for the listeners, but I want to talk about Aiden, because Aiden is a very, very intriguing character, I would say. So what can you tell us about him? Just go in a brief description of Aiden? Maybe?
Yeah, sure. I would say Aiden is He's a modern-day vigilante he's a guy who's made mistakes in his life. He grew up in the mean streets of Chicago. He's never been on the right side of the law. He's messed up. And those mistakes that he's made have bit him in the ass, and they've ended up hurting his family. So when we meet him at the start of the game, he is trying to fix those mistakes. He's trying to find the people responsible for hurting his family, and that's what drives him through the game. It's, protecting his family and getting vengeance on those who hurt them before. And you know, he's a bit of a tragic character. He's a flawed character for sure. We always consider him a bit of an anti-hero. You know, he's a guy whose objectives are noble. I think players will be able to relate with them, but his methods are pretty questionable. So, and that's something the player will have to figure out themselves. How far are they willing to go to get what they want?
You mentioned Aiden as a vigilante. That's a term that we've heard a lot about him. Can you give us a bit more details? Because we've all seen the masked vigilantes in comic books and movies and stuff like that. But he does wear a mask, but he's not the same type. He's more human, if I could say.
He's certainly not a superhero vigilante by any means. Everything that you can do in the game is very much grounded in reality. He's using his phone. Hacking is one of his key skills that he can use in the game. But they're not magical powers. They're things that are doable. That was really important to us, to make sure that anything that he can do in the game is grounded in reality. And we really wanted to make sure that came across through the game. And I think we pulled that off pretty nicely.
I think it's important to say too that the vigilante stuff you do is often player choice. It's Pierce has his main path through the story, which has vigilante elements in it, but he's very direct in what he's trying to accomplish. All of the vigilante stuff we're seeing in the E3 demos and stuff like that, that's more the player choosing to go do these vigilante activities.
I think that's what's cool about that too, is that it's we said that Aiden's a bit of an anti-hero. He has questionable means sometimes, and that really gets put on the player. How far will you go? Do you want to really use this, which could cause an accident and hurt some innocent people? Are you willing to do that? And we don't tell the player they must do that. That's up to them.
That's up to them. So it gives them choices. Mm-hmm. That's cool. You did mention also that it's, I don't know if you use the term realism, but of course, Watch Dogs is fiction, but it's very largely based on reality. Mm-hmm. How did you guys approach that? Basically, did you allow yourselves to step over the line, or did you research everything to?
Yeah, we researched everything. We were pretty hardcore early on. We've been on this project for 5 years, so it's been a long process. And so we researched everything inside and out to make sure that we kind of understood what was possible. And some of the ideas we came up with early on were kind of near future. They were like, we can kind of do that. But the Chicago we were creating was feeling a bit like a near future. But over the years, that near future has suddenly become very present.
Yeah.
Everything that we proposed in the game a while ago is now like you can do everything that we knew theoretically.
Yeah.
Theoretically, we could do everything that we proposed, but now we've seen examples of pretty much everything that we.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing. I mean, whatever we see in the trailers and the demos and everything, it seems to be happening right now.
Yeah.
I have a funny story there. I think it was in pre-prod, we actually had the QR code come up and it got passed around. It was, look at this new QR code. It's something new and fascinating. And now I think somebody said you can get a QR code on a banana. It's become so
They're
common.
everywhere.
So we thought, well, this big high-tech thing. I think, 10 years from now, our game may be unintentionally hilarious at the tech stuff. But
yeah, it's like any tech, right? Any tech you look back on after a while, it kind of gets that dated feeling. But it's very current right now. I mean, that's the thing that's been particularly exciting about where we are with the game, where it's coming out right now. It's coming out at a point where everybody's thinking about this.
Yeah.
And when we were coming up with the game originally, it was around, it was there, it was, but it wasn't as present and pervasive as it is now. It's constantly in the news, the top headlines. It's all about privacy. It's all about how far you can go with your, what can you hack? What does that mean for us as a society? They've now, I think it was at DEF CON, the hacker convention that they have in Las Vegas. They just came out with they just showed how they can use your cell phone to basically do everything that Aiden can do. So and how it's it's a reality.
Do you guys feel responsible for that?
That is on us.
Yes.
That's 100%.
We're responsible for Derek Snowden, right?
Well, exactly. That whole thing there was
just one other comment for like grounding it in reality. I think it really helps a lot, and it goes to the living city stuff. People who are chatting on their phones, they're using current emoticons or using current memes in some cases. We're very up to speed on the current culture, internet culture. I think that's really going to make people feel grounded in the game.
Yeah. So you just mentioned Living City. That's something that we talked about with the sound team in the first podcast, and that was super interesting. And they mentioned how they had to record so many lines with so many not only the main characters but also the NPCs in the city. So I guess you guys were responsible for all that. You wrote all that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Lee, actually, we sent all of us actually did a stint in Chicago. We all went to Chicago. I think Lee spent the most time in Chicago recording a lot of the voices there.
Yeah, I know. We spent a total of about 6 weeks in Chicago.
Wow.
Working with local actors there because, people in Montreal don't talk like they do in Chicago. So we had to go there to get the sound.
Yeah.
And, it was really helpful actually because, none of us are from Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so while we were there, we had people who were like, and we told them, look, we're not from Chicago. Our game is in Chicago. Mm-hmm. If you come across something, if you read something that's like, oh, you wouldn't say that here, let us know. If there's slang that's local to Chicago, let us know. And just that first week, we learned so much, especially with our viceroys. We had this one guy, Jeremy Earl, great actor. He's also a former gang member and a current Chicago cop.
Wow.
And he was looking at our slang for our viceroys, one of our factions, and he was like, "Oh no, they don't say this. No. Is this?" And he knew I wasn't from LA, and so he was like, "Oh yeah, they say this in LA." I'm like, "Yeah, no, we don't say this here." And he would tell us a new thing to say, And I learned all these things. I didn't know whip was a car, because apparently because you whip it around corners. Okay. That's what he said. And then there's so many other things that you'd be like, "Oh no, I'll change this, and change that," and that was invaluable.
It was just all kinds of micro details, which players may not catch. People from Chicago are going to catch things like we would say. You'd go down to the waterfront, and they're like, no, lakefront.
Oh,
okay,
right.
Lakefront. There it is.
Yeah, no canal.
They've got that little river that goes through with all the bridges. So to us, that was a canal. Nope. They don't call it a canal.
There's the Joe thing. Apparently, everybody in Chicago is Joe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you hear a lot of Joes in the game, it's intentional. You're not actually named Joe.
Wow.
Not laziness on our part.
So how do you guys as writers approach that? Because we know that Watch Dogs is a huge world, right? There's so many NPCs, so many lines, so many things are going to happen. How do you guys approach them? What's your process for writing everything like that? Do you have your own, or is it
caffeine?
Yeah, a lot of caffeine.
I think we all probably did it differently because all of us took a crack at the Living World stuff. Because if you think about it, we have the text combos that you can hack. Right?
Yeah.
We have the phone calls that you can hack. And we have the street conversations you can eavesdrop on. And then we have privacy invasion scenarios and stuff. So between all of those things, with all these different writers all sitting down and saying, okay, well, I'll take a chunk of these, and you take a chunk of these, and everything, and we all kind of had our different way. And I think the funniest thing that happened was during recording, we would be recording something, and then there'd be a line, and an actor would read it, and we'd be like, wait a second, that was a real conversation that we had. And like, I remember this conversation, hold on. Like, someone just like wrote this down. And so it's literally dragging it from everywhere, right? You're pulling from influences all over the place, which makes sense. It's a city. We're trying to recreate a whole city with real people. So you put in everything that, that fits, everything that's believable.
I remember I was downtown, walking downtown, and this guy, just kind of this crazy guy, was wandering past, and he was just making a rant. He was just ranting on nothing. And I was like, oh my god! I pull out my phone, and I'm typing exactly what he's saying verbatim, right? Just verbatim, because he kept repeating it in these weird ways. And I type it verbatim, get to work, I'm like, Lee, we got to put this in. Lee goes to Chicago, records it just exactly as is, and so we were grabbing it from everywhere.
Wow.
I think the one thing we wanted to make sure was that we had objectives for each of these. We had to make sure that the stories could come from anywhere. They could cover any topic, but they really had to be short, to the point, and everything had to have some sort of value. It didn't have to drive our story forward necessarily, or our plot. It didn't have to drive our plot, but it had to have its own. You had to feel like, okay, that was worth listening to. I got something out of that, as opposed to just
some random
the middle of a conversation that means ultimately nothing. That's just a waste of everybody's time. So we wanted to make sure that at least everything had something where you're pulled in, and suddenly, okay, I'm getting a piece of this person's life, this person's experience. That was key to us.
What's the volume like in terms of? I mean, if you had a ballpark estimate of how much or how many different lines you're.
Well, the big thing, for exact numbers, I don't know, here's what I can tell you. It was key for us to make sure that Chicago's a city of 2.7 million people, and we had to make sure that we're giving you the illusion that you're in a city with 2.7 million people. We're not writing for that many people, obviously, but we had to give that sense so you feel like that. And the trick is the phone conversations that you hear a phone conversation once, it's dead.
All right.
You hear it again, and you're going to be like, oh, they're repeating their conversations. So if it plays once, it's pulled from the game. That's it. You won't hear it again.
Wow.
That's
so we had to create a lot of content to make sure that over the hours of gameplay that you've got in the game, where you can at any point at random turn to somebody and hack their phone and hear that conversation, we need to be able to. There needs to be something there for that. So it was a lot of writing.
That's amazing that you can actually have that many. I mean, even with a team, just have that many different things. That at the end of it, you're not just writing secret messages like, "Please stop. Let me stop writing these."
I think there might have been a few of those.
Like one guy's in conversation in Chicago, going like, "Oh my God, I've been here all night."
I've read some bitching about bosses in there. I've read some conversations about crunch time. Just another reference, we have our database has started to get really, really slow lately. And just looking into that with the people who designed the tools, they say we've pushed it past any limit that they ever expected somebody to hit.
Wow.
So we're actually, for future projects, we're going to have to look into bigger databases.
Or
better tools.
Yeah. You can write a lot of content, but on a street, just people just having conversations in the streets. We have this whole branching system that we've kind of refined, where it's just a bunch of different possible permutations of conversations that people can have, and we write a bunch of opening lines and middle lines and follow-up lines and stuff that are all sort of interchangeable with each other. And to get the actual number of possible combinations, I actually had to go to a programmer and say, hey, so we have this thing where we have this X number of characters that can say X number of lines in X number of different ways. Can you give me an idea of how many different variations we'll have in the game if we do this? And he's like, oh, hold on, I think it's this. Oh wait, no, it's this. And then he ended up grabbing another programmer, and then the two of them actually banged out an Excel sheet with a formula where I could plug in, we have this many characters saying this many lines with this many exchanges, and you plug all that in and it does the math and it comes out with a number to let you know exactly how many different conversations you get out of it. And the number was really high. It was
on top of countless very specific, precise conversations as well. Exactly. So you combine all that. And the extra thing to think about, which you haven't talked about yet, is on top of that, you've got this thing we call the profiler in the game. And the profiler, what the profiler does is it's a skill Pierce has where he can scan somebody and he can get personal details on you. Get your name, your occupation, some interesting fact about you. Yeah. And that works off a database as well. And so they all come up, the names are generated. We have a bank of first names, a bank of last names, and possible occupations. Too. Ethnicity by district, if it's a low-income district, if it's a high-income district. And it all comes together to create this unique NPC. What's cool about it is that I think, and this is the first time I've seen this in a game done to this extent, any of the NPCs, the civilians that you see in the game, they're not just, you know, nice looking NPCs that walk around. They've suddenly become very three-dimensional characters where you suddenly see what they look like, but also what they do, what's a personal quirk of theirs, and then you hack their conversation, and now you hear on top of that another conversation. So all these civilians become really unique. They become unique characters that you're meeting, and that affects the choices you make. How much destruction do I want to cause when I just saw that there's a mother there who's unemployed?
I know. That's something I heard you mention in another interview or panel or something, and that's something I wanted to ask you also. Is it something that was planned from the beginning, or yes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, this we didn't happen upon this idea. This was something we knew that we wanted to. Well, first of all, we looked at all the things you could do with the phone, and we thought, well, it'd be great if you could profile people and get information on them. And then we immediately realized, well, the benefits of that, it suddenly turns every person you come across.
Well, it means nobody's faceless.
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody's faceless, and it includes the bad. Yeah, exactly. It includes the bad guys. Which, well, you have a good story about that, Bob.
It's actually Kevin that has the AI story, right?
Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah. There was a time where we were developing the profiler, and so I was playing the game, just testing it, and I was coming up on this thug. I was coming up behind him, and I was, he was trying to kill me, but he didn't know I was right behind him. And my profiler was on, so I aimed my gun at him, and the profiler automatically pops up and says "newlywed." And I thought, oh, he said, I can't kill a newlywed, but then I did.
I think one of the cool thing when we get all these systems together is what we're starting to see people play. They'll start profiling somebody, and you have to tell them as you're listening to their call. And somebody else interesting looking passes by, so they latch onto them. So we're actually creating like the ultimate people watching game. If you don't want to play all the other modes, you could spend hours just following people through the city.
Well, I remember ages ago, like when we were talking about what do we want to do with Watch Dogs and where's it all going, and the one cool thing that we were fixating on was this notion of when you sit on a bus, and you're just riding the bus and you hear some really crazy conversation behind you, right? And you're just catching a snippet of these two people having some bizarre conversation about whatever, basements and weird crap going on. And you can't help but kind of lean in and go, what the hell are they talking about? And then they leave, and you're like, oh, that's all I heard. And we thought if we could tap into that kind of feeling of, you're kind of listening in on somebody just for a few seconds to get a glimpse of their life, then we win. And I think we've pulled it off really well.
From what you're saying, I think so too. So you just mentioned you're playing the game right now. It's obviously still in development, but it's far enough that you can play it. You're all playing it. Does it happen that you guys are kind of surprised by what you're doing?
Always.
Even though
always, because we had 5 people writing this stuff. So and often I'll read something and realize who it came from because I know that they don't.
I think that's the game, right?
Yeah,
that's the game we're all trying to figure out. That sounds like.
Or there'll be something where all of us will see something and we'll share it and be like, oh, this is really funny. Check this out, and then nobody will remember who wrote it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't write that. Well, I didn't write it. Who wrote it?
Somebody take credit. It's great.
So did you guys obviously all work together? Did you have specific tasks for writing the game, or did you just work like as a team and just rip off each other?
I mean, I know when we were writing the main script, we tended to pick certain acts, and one person would do one act, one would do another. But I think as things constantly shift and we have other tasks come up. We all kind of worked on every act. Like every scene has probably been touched by everybody. It's in the end, I think we all ended up doing pretty much everything on the narrative side.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true. I think there were some areas that I think Ethan probably knows a little more about multiplayer than the rest of us, because he's focused a bit more on that as well. Lee probably knows more about our crime detection system, because that's something that he focused on. But yeah, Ethan's absolutely right. We all kind of touched everything.
All right. This reminds me of you. We came back to the main story. Of course, it's about Aiden Pierce. This reminded me of a question that I saw on Twitter lately. Are we able to say at this point how Aiden became like the man he is? Let's say skill-wise. Like, does he have a background of being like policeman or military or anything?
He was not a policeman. He's never been a policeman. He's never been on the right side of the law. I think there's been confusion on that. People have always assumed that he's had some sort of cop training or whatever, and he has not.
Okay.
Absolutely, he has not. He's been a guy who grew up in the streets and learned to handle himself in the streets. We always say he's been grew up in the mean streets of Chicago. He ended up doing small-time stuff like siphoning credit cards, leeching bank accounts, and that's what he ended up doing with a partner of his in the past. And the more he got into that, he kind of stumbled his way into bigger jobs that he probably shouldn't have poked his nose into, and that kind of messed things up for him.
All right.
I think it's important to say that he has a lot of friends too that do have very specific skill sets. So, I know in the trailers
we did get to meet a couple of them in the trailers.
I think usually we're showing him as a guy working alone, and he does do his missions alone quite a bit, but he also does have a lot of allies that help him. So.
You'd mentioned like a little earlier that it's the player who decides what Aiden can do when he's not in a mission or following the main storyline. But when you're writing a character who the player gets to choose whether they are completely law-abiding in the interim or if they're causing tons of destruction, do you kind of have to tread in the middle when you're writing that, or do you kind of let go at that point and say we're going to tell this story and then give just give the freedom to the player?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tricky one, right? Because that's the tricky thing with all of video game writing. You're giving so much agency to the player, and you have to find a way to make your story somehow fit with that. I think with what we've found is what really works well with Aiden is we've given him this. His story is he's a vigilante almost by accident, right? He's become this guy who's monitored his family to an obsessive degree, right? And while he's doing that, he ends up seeing other things that happen that he can't just ignore. Some guy gets attacked in an alley while he's just monitoring his family, and he can't just let it happen. He has to kind of step in. So almost by accident, he becomes this guy. And that, when we've been seeing how people are playing the game, that's how players are reacting. They're like, they see something happen and they can't help it. They gotta step in. And we've always said he's this anti-hero, so he's flawed in some of his choices and how far he'll go. So that opens up the door for the player to be like, well, okay, I can go as far as I want or not. So I think the who Aiden is fits well with who the player may or may not want to be, whichever way they want to.
Okay, so you kind of just make it so that whatever choice it could potentially happen. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think that kind of.
Yeah. I'd say too, our level designers are careful not to make you do just inherently evil stuff. They always give you a few options when you go into a mission.
Okay.
I know there are some sensitive issues like shooting at police, so they're careful to make sure that there's context there or there are requirements.
Okay.
There's consequences. There's severe consequences for shooting cops. We don't encourage that in the game at all.
No.
But if you kill cops, cops are tough. and for Aiden, the cops aren't his enemy. They're trying to shut him down for sure. They want to shut him down, but he's not fighting against the cops. He's trying to avoid the cops because a city doesn't want vigilantes running around. The cops don't want vigilantes roaming the streets. But Aiden's not, they're not his target. he just needs to avoid them.
Yeah.
And then keep in mind too, with the profiler, you could actually detect this guy is a shady cop. This guy has done some stuff that now allows me to be able to do combat with him and not feel bad about it.
You guys thought of everything.
There's a lot to think about in that one. It's a big city.
Yeah.
It's going to be a kick-ass game. I think everyone's going to love it. They're going to be able to spend a long time in this game. There's a lot of freedom in this game. You're going to feel particularly powerful in a car, like you've never felt before. I think the things you can do with your phone are pretty impressive, and I'm curious to see how players are going to combine all those elements. We've given them the tools to sort of go crazy in the city, combine hacking abilities however you want. And I think that will be what's really cool is when players start posting their videos, and I think we as developers are all going to sit by our computer and be looking at these videos and see, wow, we never even thought of that. Yeah, we hadn't even thought of that.
I think one thing I actually really like about our game is that you can have a lot of fun without shooting people.
Yeah.
You can walk through the city and there's stuff to do that doesn't involve violence. So like when I play, usually I'll load up the game to check something out. I need to fix something or tweak something or whatever. But I always end up getting distracted, and I end up listening to phone calls and reading chat messages and hacking into cameras to see what things I can eavesdrop on. It's
that's
great.
The thing too, right? Because we all recorded many of the voices, and we did so many voices that for us, even for us, still there's so many fresh conversations we've never heard.
Yeah.
So which brings me, and we're going to end on this, but which brings me to a very personal question I'm going to ask you guys. When the game is going to launch, how do you think you're going to play it? Are you going to be like the very violent person, or are you going to be are you going to be light or dark side?
Well, that's a good question, because I'll tell you this: there is no light and dark side.
All right.
To Aiden, that's not how the game works. The game doesn't ask you to become the good Aiden or the bad Aiden. We've always been very interested in the gray zone, and the game reacts that way. The game doesn't give you a point system that says you're the hero or you're the enemy. It doesn't do that. You can play it how you want, and the only reflection of how you're playing comes through the citizens. If you start being more reckless, then citizens may be a little more terrified of you. They may call the cops a little quicker on you, but there's no, the game isn't suddenly going to decide, all right, you're evil, and the rest of the game is going to be the evil path. We don't have that because we've gone to this great length to make sure that we're creating full realized citizens. We sure as hell don't want to fall apart with the main character and just turn him into a black and white, good cape, bad cape kind of guy. It's like that's not where we're at. It's like that shady middle ground is where we want the game to live. So. In terms of how I'll play it, I'm probably going to do once the game's all done and everything. I'm probably going to put the disc in and just play it very straight and controlled right through the game, so I can basically see, does it do what it's supposed to do? Do I get the feeling that I hope everyone was going to have with this game?
I tend to shoot people who comment on my driving in the game. So I think all of that was nice and accurate, but I play kind of chaotically, so I think I'd do that. I try to break things.
All right. And Lee?
Oh, I'm going to be easily distracted. I'm going to do all the open world and side stuff and everything.
I think of that.
I'll do the story as well, but I'm one of those guys where I do a story mission, and then if I see something interesting along the way, I'll just veer off.
Squirrel.
Do that exactly. So, see.
How do you think you're going to play the game?
Oh, me, I love an open world game, and it's kind of hard because I think that the story is going to be so compelling that I'm going to want to go through that, but I feel as though once I've finished with that, I'm going to spend a lot of time just listening to everything, because I think that's one of the aspects that interests me the most, just the idea that you can experience so many different personalities and learn so much in it. So I think I'll pretty steady, and I'll try to stay away from the police as much as possible.
Yeah, I think I should do that too. All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate that you took some your very valuable time right now to talk to us and our fans. I hope you enjoyed this podcast with the story design team of Watch Dogs. Of course, if you have any questions or comments on this, you can always hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere else on the internet that we have a presence. Thanks, Kevin, Ethan, Lee, and Kim. All right, thanks a lot, and see you guys later.
Thank you.